Let's bring in Mark Lavie. He's a Middle East journalist and the author of Why Are We Still Afraid? A reporter's 46-year story of Israel growing strong. Also joined by international security analyst Marty Himel. Thank you for joining us here on Crossroads. Jared Kushner, in that same interview, he delivered a statement that made a lot of headlines here in the U.S., but also in the Middle East. He said that he has little confidence in the Palestinians' capacity for governing a state of their own. What do you think about that, and how are the Palestinians reading this statement?
Well, I'm afraid to say that Jared Kushner is not really interested that much that the Palestinians will self-govern. He's more interested they'll self-govern within an autonomy, but not self-govern within a state. And he's at loggerheads with the Palestinian Authority. He's trying to say, well, we can do better with the Palestinian people, but that's not the case. As long as the United States is insisting that it's not going to do anything concerning Palestinian statehood, but try to get them to agree to some sort of autonomy with a lot of money, it's just not going to fly no matter what he tries.
Do you understand why he's casting doubt, why he's so doubtful about the...
Yes, of course, because after all, as Martin mentioned, the Palestinians want a state, but do they really? They had offers of a state from Israel twice in 2000 and in 2008, and they walked out and slammed the door. Do they want a state? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But for the meantime, they're saying they don't, at least according to the parameters that any reasonable offer would be made in. They've already turned it down twice. So Kushner is obviously going somewhere else. I'm not a journalist anymore, so I don't have to guess what he's going to do. I can wait till he actually publishes the plan. But clearly, he's starting with the economic element. We tried that already years ago, and the Palestinians turned it down flat. And they've already turned down this plan flat before they even see it. So why are we talking about that?
Over the weekend, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also weighed in on the peace plan. Let's take a listen of what he had to say about it.
You'll see what I think any fair person would describe as a very detailed, one might argue unexecutable, because no one believes that this will be easy. Mr. Kushner, Mr. Greenblatt, President Trump, myself, none of us believe this will be easy, but a very detailed economic outline of what success might look like in the entire region. I get why people think this is going to be a deal that only the Israelis could love. I understand the perception of that. I hope everyone will just give the space to listen and let it settle in a little bit and see if, in fact, we have struck the right place.
So you know what, gentlemen, to me, when Mike Pompeo says that he understands why people think that Israel will like the peace plan, but people have to give it a chance and let it settle in for a little bit. It sounds as if the peace plan is not aiming to deliver a solution, an imminent solution to the conflict, but is aiming, to change the entire discourse around it for the long run. Could it be the case?
Well, I would like to qualify something Mark said that will also answer your question. It's true, the Palestinians will never accepted those plans, and its idea of a Palestinian state is basically a Palestinian state that replaces Israel. It's not interested in any coexistence with an Israeli state. It says sometimes it is interested, but it isn't. And so that makes it even harder to make this plan work, because the leadership here gets plenty of money from various sources. Yes, the United States has cut it off, but it gets money from the Europeans and from the Arab world, etc. And money is not the problem of the Palestinian leadership, and it's not, frankly, so worried about money for the Palestinian people at this stage. So I think that the long-term discussion here will just be a long-term discussion between Israel, the United States, and Gulf states that want to placate the United States because they're so worried about what's going on with Iran. But the Palestinians won't play with this.
I think that there is a chance this could work, but not in a very, very short time. It appears that they're starting with the economic issue once again, as others have done in the past, and it has failed. But what they're trying to show is that if there were peace, the Middle East could be a blossoming flower of progress and education and culture, and that perhaps this time the Arabs might get behind it. This is what's changed. The Iran-Saudi conflict has changed the Middle East. Arab Spring, which I covered personally in Cairo for 2 years, has changed the Middle East. Things are changing now.
You mentioned Cairo, and Egypt and also Saudi Arabia are two countries that are supposed, along with the United Arab Emirates, to take part in the U.S. economic peace plan in Bahrain. Now, over the weekend, President Sisi of Egypt said that his country will not accept anything that the Palestinians don't want. And also Saudi King Salman last week, he said that he reiterated his support for a Palestinian state based on the 67 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. So are they playing both teams, countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia?
Absolutely. First of all, pronouncements in the Arab world are not exactly the same as pronouncement on this side of the ocean. When you say something in the Arab world, it's akin to doing it. So they've paid their price, they've paid their dues, they've given the Palestinians a verbal support, and now let's go get down to business. Israel is doing business in all of these countries at this point, and is not talking about it. Israel has very close relations with Egypt, doesn't talk about them. So this is really the way forward. I think in the end, if there's to be a real solution, it'll have to be imposed by the United States, but more than the United States, by the Arab world. It'll have to be imposed on Israel and the Palestinians. Both will jump up and down and yell and scream bloody murder, but in the end, it'll be a solution that can be acceptable to all sides, given some time.
So Iran as a shared enemy is bringing these countries together. And we also, gentlemen, want your thoughts on this topic. Iran and the United States may both be ready to come to the table. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said he would meet with Iranian clerical leaders with no preconditions. He did reiterate, though, that sanctions would not be lifted without Iran meeting dozens of demands.
We're prepared to engage in a conversation with no preconditions. We're ready to sit down with them. But the American effort to fundamentally reverse the malign activity of this Islamic Republic, this revolutionary force, is going to continue.
Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says that the United States needs to lead the way back to the negotiating table. President Rouhani said in a televised address to the U.S. that the U.S. must return, quote, to normal behavior for talks to resume. And here's what I want to ask you. To return to normal state, that's the precise quote in his words of Rouhani, meaning that Rouhani is waiting for a democratic president who's willing to make concessions to his country?
He wants to see the ball go backwards towards acceptance of the Obama agreement that was signed with Iran. He wants everything to go back to that state. But that's not going to happen as well. And what I think Iran is trying to say, what Pompeo is trying to say is he's really trying to ease the American public. They're not going all at war with them. They'll look for a political solution.
I wrote something in this book that's called The Danger of I Told You So. If you cancel the Iranian the nuclear plan, the Iranians will probably go back to enriching nuclear material, and then you'll be able to say, I told you so, they're bad people. What have we gained from this? We've gained nothing. By canceling a plan that was agreed on a year earlier, the message you're sending is, why bother negotiating with the United States at all? Because in a year, they'll cancel it again. So we got a lot of states.
Say it was a bad deal in first place.
Well, it's a long book. I can't read the whole thing.
Okay, but let me ask you this. You're listening to the statements coming out of Washington and Tehran. Could it be that the two sides really want to talk, but each side is really trying to save face at the moment? It sounds like that.
I don't think the Iranians would tactically talk to this administration as long as they basically take this stand, which is that they ripped up the previous agreement. I don't think any country would, to tell you the truth. You make an agreement, you sign it, then you rip it up. They're going to talk? Of course not.
Rouhani is saying if the U.S. behaves the right way, we will talk. Although Ayatollah Khamenei, he does not agree to any kind of negotiation. So who sets the tone?
It's all showbiz here, folks. Each side is trying to show that it's on the side of the angels. And that they're doing the right thing, and that they're the victims of whatever the other side is doing. There will be no talks. There will be no negotiations. Why would there be? There were 2 years of negotiations, which emerged with the most strict agreement I've ever seen. And I've been doing this for 50 years. The strictest agreement I've ever seen between two parties, Iran and the other side, which have unbelievable restrictions against Iran in its nuclear program, its economy, everything. And yet this was not enough, and it was torn up and thrown away. So now they're going to be jockeying for position to see who can come out on top of this thing. But Iran is basically, I think, playing for time at this point.
All right, Mark Lavie and Martin Himel, thank you for joining us here on Sudden Breaking.